if we talk about the biggest weakness today, is always still humans, and social engineering is actually that key part. And of course, we will actually have a Q&A and panel, and Tony will be actually facilitating it. So without ado, I think just a bit about myself. So I've been in the industry for around 20 over years. I've done various roles. Basically, a lot of times I think where I focus a lot is really looking at how I can help my customers in terms of solutioning for them, in terms of how they can solve their security problems as well. Yeah, food keeps me happy. I think if you look at the photo and look at me now, things are getting wider. Challenges, I think in the current state, I think when we talk about any sort of role, and especially in cybersecurity, this is really what we see and really what keeps me going. And especially in the context, I think I do actually encourage people to volunteer, and just like what we're doing here in AiSP, that's really keep us the passion and interest beyond just work as well. Yeah. So I think to start off, fundamentally, I think if we talk about the landscape, I think in Singapore is because we have a pretty strong national mandate, the overall strategy, which is led by the Cybersecurity Agency. This actually, brings about, I think, a lot of information that actually brings up. So one of the key things I want to highlight, I think this landscape report that comes out annually. And what we can see, I think if we talk about the stats, I would say that if we talk about phishing, and phishing is really all about, a lot of it actually is transmitted through emails and so on. And this is actually becoming more and more prevalent. Part of the reason, of course, it means that the use of email as a communication tool has increased a lot. And that also, in the same case, prompts the hackers to actually target this, right? And the other key part, I think, if we talk about the digital realm today, the shop front may no longer be physical. A lot of times, actually, that is what will be actually the website. So actually, in that context, if you want to disrupt or even you want to hold certain business ransom, a defacement approach actually becomes that key part. So that disruptive positioning actually becomes a target. And this actually is quite a key impact and risk because, it is the business shopfront as of today. Yeah. And of course, ransomware. This has probably been made famous by what we experienced even in Singapore from the WannaCry back 2 years ago. And today, if we come from that angle in terms of this is really what hackers are again targeting, what is actually valuable to us, right? Really the data that we use. And a lot of times ransomware really targets the data you use the most, encrypting it, making it inaccessible to you. So sometimes if we look at the type of cases that's reported here, I think a lot of times that, what has been disclosed could be a lot more. But so in some cases, I think where through our awareness, we do actually encourage be it the businesses or the SMEs to actually report this when you encounter any sort of incident to SingCert. Part of the reason, not so much to become a statistics, but to actually be more aware of it. And SingCert actually will help you to actually eradicate the issue as well, and be able to help you on advising you what could be done as well. Right? And moving ahead, the other key part that I think in our current sense that everything goes online, and not forgetting today is actually a key day, is 11/11. I think most of people will be, I would say, clearing their shopping carts online and things like that. So e-commerce really becomes that key part, and fraud actually is also a key concern in that context, right? So if we talk about that, cybercrime is really one of the key outcomes, I think, through the digital portion, where the intention to either by fraud or even misleading people and so on. Yeah, so this really sees that online cheating in the sense that people are actually trying to get around the platforms and systems in that sense. So end of the day, I think even taking a larger view, in the global realm, we do see point of sales attacks. This I can say is probably not so prevalent in Singapore, but probably if you have read the news, those are some of the major hacks that happened like way back in terms of in US, in terms of Target, they actually got hacked through the point of sales and resulted in a large data breach in terms of information. Supply chain attacks. Today, I think we are all quite dependent. I think with the COVID, you'll notice supply chains become vulnerable because of the constraints in terms of that as well. Yeah. And data breaches will still be the key part. Ultimately, in the current digital transformation, data will still be the key currency and the key asset that actually everybody is going after, be it on just for the analytics part or actually the hackers itself. Mobile attacks, because today, if we come from that angle, we are actually practically doing everything through the mobile, and mobile apps are actually probably one of the key carriers. So I think if we talk about one of the typical advice I tend to give people is that, use only apps that you are sure of and use only apps that you actually need as well. And of course, most importantly, the spear phishing as it is, there is actually the way to achieve target people in terms of misleading them to think that it is coming. I mean, the most common example these days is even thinking it's coming from a supplier or coming from a customer and actually effecting certain funds transfer. That's quite very common scenario, especially in spear phishing. So when we look at all this, I think the fundamental thing is it actually drives towards that, in order to be, resilience in the current sense, we really need to firstly be aware. But the aware part also needs to look at, I think, the risk that actually happens. And this is quite apparently when, if we deploy, we will learn to look at, I think, aware of the threats and what are the risks, and the risk and also what it poses to the people, the process and the technology that you have. Right? So end of the day, when we look at that, the key digital assets, or you want to say, is actually the data that you hold. And this can come from things that, if you are in manufacturing or in your designs, your intellectual property, your personal information, or some sort of, I would say, customer or market information, all this will be things that could be targeted as well. Right? And all this in the current state is that you are actually no longer just restricted to accessing it in the office. You're actually working from home, and that actually opens up the exposure. Right? And we do see, I think, in all the key breaches, I think if we talk about, I would say, personal data, PDPA breaches in the past, a lot of it, if we actually attribute, is also down to the human or negligence, and in some cases in that sense. So this actually will really boil down to how we need to tighten both on how the people, the process, as well as the systems itself, right? So I would say that I think if we look at ahead, right, not too long term, just in the next coming year, we will still see things that's driven to COVID. So one of the key reasons, if you want to say, the hackers will always focus on things that interest people. COVID will be still that strong interest. In fact, you want to say, typically anything that will draw people's attention, even related to money, related to jobs, even I would say with the lack of contact related to relationships, could be also part of that driver, or actually lure to actually get people. Because this accelerated digitalization is becoming inevitable. I think today, if we talk about every business, you need to think of a way, if you can't have people coming to your shop, coming to pick up, how do you actually work towards actually be able to market online and things like that. Now, all this basically means that your whole exposure, because your digital footprint actually is larger, and that will expose you as well, right? And the same way when we talk about the businesses, the same way it will actually become the case when we talk about the employees or partners. And because of actually working from home, you actually have more multiple routes into the organization or into the business today. And that is also every one of the people can be a target as well, right? Because this other part in terms of grants, or this, like what we said, this will be a key interest. And I think in a later topic, I think probably will be covered by our, this will be one area where the cybersecurity threat actors will actually leverage on this keen interest to actually impersonate and actually come and lure you to actually be compromised as well. Yeah. So I would say that I think one of the key things we will notice is that a lot of the popular platforms will actually be targets. So this will actually means that as you use them, you also need to secure yourself. So to actually minimize the risk that you actually face. So from this, actually, what we actually to share a bit more about what we've been doing on the cybersecurity awareness and advisory program is really to actually create this whole awareness, especially for business owners. I think one of the key promise statements when 2 years ago we start off this program was to, I think, identify that as the businesses are progressively digitized, there is actually risk, and if you do not think of the risk up front and the measures you need to do, you are effectively, I would say, creating an impact when things when you get an incident as well. And one of the things also on their part is it's not that help is not out there, but sometimes the awareness of the help, actually the resources that's available, is also something that needs to be constantly outreach as part of this. So when we devised that, we identified there's a need to create this common starting point in terms of, I would say, a platform where people can actually collaborate. And this collaboration, as we look at it, drives towards a few things. Elevating from the business owner in terms of their understanding of cybersecurity, what it means, creating a framework around the knowledge they should look at, and of course, most importantly, work on a whole ecosystem, such as this here, where we are working with SBF in terms of doing this outreach, not only talking about the awareness, but even eventually driving towards providing solutions for the SMEs as well. And this is really where you can see the important part of business and trade associations play in this as the key outreach mechanism that we look at. And this actually is in three parts. What we actually do today really is to drive towards the workshops. So this is actually an awareness workshop we conduct. We do actually will be doing focus groups to get feedback in terms of what interests the businesses as well. And of course, there will be advisories workshop. So one of the key things we started off was back then when WannaCry actually occurred, we actually quickly run advisory workshops to help outreach to create the awareness as well. Yeah. In terms of knowledge, this is what we are really doing in terms of that framework, producing content to help guide individuals or businesses. And of course now to really provide that guide to the resources. So today, as we speak, I think if you are aware of I would say the SME Go Digital and so on, there are actually schemes, and not only do they cover solutions to go digital, but they do cover the cybersecurity context as well. So very quickly to share, I think in terms of what we mentioned as the framework. So what we recognize, I think if we talk about SMEs, they while they need to be cybersecurity aware, they need to understand the linkage to the digital business. And what we actually devised was to actually really even blend that together with understanding what is the, if you want to say in Singapore, what's the IT maps in terms of going digital, what are the technologies behind, of course, the risk and the best practices. But most importantly, I think today, as we go digital with the amount of data, especially personal or customer data we handle, what are your obligations, especially legally and so on. And most importantly, moving towards how you can actually better handle incidents, right? So this becomes that platform where we are actually driving together with all our partners in terms of people like the business association like SBF, as well as other professional associations and so on. And this is really one of the key things that we also hold an annual conference, and we just held that thing last week. And one of the things you can actually visit our website for that playback if you missed it. And this is just to highlight, I think, some of the current partners we work with closely. And if you wish to actually even be part of this program, you can also reach out to us, and we can actually collaborate on that. Yeah. So maybe just to end off a bit about, I think, what we do at the Association of Information Security Professionals. So I think besides the focus on really elevating the cybersecurity awareness, we also focus on actually increasing the professionalism in terms of our own security professionals in Singapore as well. And of course, in this context, it's really driving towards a vision that's actually looking at a safe cyberspace and supported by a whole ecosystem, building that whole collaboration platform jointly with both, I would say, cybersecurity groups as well as the business groups as well. Okay. And with that, I really thank you for this, and really to hand it over to I would say Priscilla to go on to the next speakers, which will actually share more about the best practices as well. Yeah.
Okay, yep.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Mr. Koo, for the insightful sharing. Next, may I invite Mr. James Tan, AiSP Exco member, to share with us more on how to take control of your cyber risk when working from home. Mr. Tan, please.
Hello everyone, good morning. Hope you can see the slide. So I'm sharing this slide from my computer, and okay. So we only have about 20 plus minutes, so I'm not going to talk too much about myself, but if you want to contact me, my contact information is as seen. All right. So very briefly, I would like to summarize what we're going to go through later on, and that is how to we take control of the risk, especially cyber risk, when we work from home. Now, there's a little bit of distinction here. So later on, I'm going to show you two scenarios. One is of a normal, traditional fortress mentality, where everyone is working within the so-called the safe environment of the office. And the other paradigm shift will be to so-called a hostile environment mentality, right? Where employees, staffs, even business owners could be working from anywhere, all right? So there is no so-called centralized so-called fortress to speak of, right? So how are we going to take control? So to set the context, right, we're going to use this very simple three-step approach, right? So the three steps are to first identify, to do an inventory, to know what we have or what you have. And then the second step is to assess the so-called the risk, right? To assess the dangers, the harm, the so-called the regulatory requirements, and so forth, right? So during the assessment part, we'll of course we will derive actions that should be taken upon, right? Then of course we want to take control of it. We want to mitigate these risks, or to bring them down to a particular acceptable threshold that we are comfortable with, or the business is comfortable with, right? So we're going to use these three very simple steps: assess, and then identify first, then to assess, and then to take control, right? In the context of work from home. Okay, so this is a quick 101 primer on what is risk management, all right? So just to give you a context, like these days, you know that it's going to rain, right? So before we go out, we will definitely take an umbrella, or, you know, find a commute that is going to keep us dry, relatively dry. So I'm going to use this very, very simple calculation again, right? There are other kind of calculations which involves a lot more parameters, like cost, asset value, so on and so forth. But in this particular calculation, we're going to just take this likelihood versus the impact. So what does it mean? Say, for example, we have a scenario whereby someone potentially could gain access to your intranet system, say your HR system, your SAP, all right? And you determine that to be able to gain access to your HR system, it requires a little bit of effort, right? Because your system is locked and secure inside your organization, and there is a security guard in front of the building, right? So relatively, it is low likelihood, low probability of it happening, right? But in the event, if somebody really gain unauthorized access or manage to steal or take away that particular server, right, so to speak of, then you may suffer a very, very big consequence of potentially a multitude of employees' information, right? So the impact or the loss of the availability of the data could be very, very high, right? Then, of course, there are some other considerations. Sometimes the data may not just because it's important because you need it, but it's important because the data are confidential or the data can pose harm to individuals, right? So you can assess it based on simple parameters like, is it confidential, all right? If there's a change in it, will it cause a significant impact to your business transactions and so forth, right? So using a likelihood and impact calculation, we can sort of, you know, risk assess this particular scenario to a medium severity, all right? So again, in business, we can't solve or we can't mitigate every single risk out there, right? We do need to make certain decisions and say that, for example, due to business costs, right, certain risk is going to be, you know, addressed, but certain other risk is going to be accepted or to be delayed until maybe the next FY, all right? But what I want to share is that typically this is what organizations practice. They use a risk prioritization matrix, all right, and determine what are they going to mitigate. But my share with you is that sometimes, even though a particular risk item or a risk is determined to be low likelihood or low impact, all right, but if they are chained in a particular manner or if they happen in a particular time, all right, it may be very, very significant to you, all right? So for example, if this particular scenario doesn't happen that often, but if it really happens, it's going to cause a significant impact, then you have to assess, right? Do you have the budget to deal with it, all right? So if, let's say, you have the resources to deal with it immediately, then why not, even though the severity is medium or is low, all right? So use the earliest opportunity to mitigate a risk, right? Instead of, you know, just blindly based upon a metric. So in this illustration here, I'm just going to show you a fortress mentality, all right? What do I mean by a fortress mentality? This is a very traditional worldview of how organizations work, all right? Firstly, you have a perimeter around your organization. Everyone works within the perimeter. So I denote it by a blue laptop, all right? And on the outside, we have the hostile environment. So we presume that there will be malware trying to enter into our network. There will be hackers out there trying to infiltrate and to steal information from outside. And they will try to attempt to penetrate into your perimeter, right? We assume that the phishing websites, the malicious servers, everything will be on the outside, right? So what we do is that we set up a perimeter around our organization, right, to filter all these external threats, right? And very rarely, we do have one or two, maybe VIPs or sales personnel requiring to go out, right? So we typically set up software on their systems or to give them a mode of remote access so that they can gain access or gain entry back into the fortress, right? So this is a very, very traditional look and feel of any organization, right? Quite predominant pre-COVID days, right? Now, in the second diagram here, right, I'm just trying to add a bit more so-called ingredients into the whole entire cookbook, right? So this looks quite familiar to you today, especially when everyone or almost every so-called knowledge worker is starting to work from home, all right? But perhaps if you're not familiar with work from home, right, we can also relate to what about work from hotel, work from cafe, or work from anywhere where there's an internet, right? So our employees are starting to be outside this perimeter, right? So what still stands? The perimeter defense around the organization is still there, all right? But what it is seeing from its perspective is that there are access, there are traffic going into the organization, presuming to be from the known employees, right? So the strategy here is that you can't use the old traditional fortress mindset, Now, because your employees are on the outside, there has to be extra rules or extra intelligence, right? Or extra insights, telemetry to be able to figure out who are good, who are bad, right? Because now, if your employees are in their hostile environment, right? And then of course, we still have a few employees still inside the organization. So the same old rules, the same old monitoring can still apply, right? So let me share a bit more. So in this case, typically, what do we have? What are the kind of workers that will be on our side? We are talking about the knowledge workers who are very familiar with technology, right? So you probably wouldn't have much problem with these employees or yourself, right? If you're familiar with using software, using tools, knowing about cyber risk. But we also have employees who are suddenly thrown into this telework scenario, right? So previously, they are comfortable working with their desktops in the office. Say, for example, a personal assistant to a director, right? Comfortable using his or her computer, right, in the office. Then suddenly, because the office has to be shut down, or there's a mandate saying that 50% in the office and 50% at default at home. Now this personal assistant has to work from home. So this personal assistant, is he or she aware of technology risk? Is he or she aware of even technical or practices that a more educated or more well-informed knowledge worker is supposed to be aware of? So in this scenario, we do have at least two spectrum of users. One that is not so stressed by having all these so-called telework tools and utilities being thrown at them, right? Then on the other spectrum, we do have personnel or employees who are suddenly put in a very stressful situation, right? Whereby they may not be comfortable, right? For example, using a company issued laptop, right? Working from home, having monitoring software, having to follow new sets of protocols, new set of rules and procedures, right? So we have two types of employees at least, right, in this scenario. So let me quickly come to the this slides on. Let me just shift to the slide because I'm having a problem clicking on it. Okay, so having these two scenarios, right, the fortress mentality and now the hostile environment, right? So I'm going to use the hostile environment to talk a little bit more, to dive a little bit deeper into what are the potential risks within this environment, right? So earlier I've talked about personnel, the psychology of the people, right? So you have humans being well-informed, being comfortable with adopting technologies, adopting rules, adopting to policies. Then on the other spectrum, you have personnel or staff that you may want to have a tender loving care with them or try to understand their psyche and perhaps even revise the policy to take consideration of their actions, right? Because from a human perspective, we are talking about social engineering threats that can be posed against the, humans, right? So we are not going to go into technology risk yet. We're just going to talk about human risk, right? So from a human risk perspective, we have social engineering threats and what kind of techniques that this social engineering could use against humans. We are talking about phishing attacks. So what is phishing? So phishing is when you get so-called similar looking websites, deceiving websites, all right, and your employees may chance upon it or being led to it. Phishing emails that may contain instructions that tries to solicit information from employees or try to even lead them to downloading a file, opening up and run a particular malicious software, right? So I think the next speaker will probably go deeper into phishing or social engineering. So there are different modes of deceive, and the human psyche, if it's not strengthened enough, right, he or she may fall and leads to running some malware or even giving away access information to the adversary or the hacker, so to speak. So once the hacker has access to the account, right, say from a social engineering attack, for example, the hackers will definitely, of course, attempt to use these access tokens or access information to get access into your software, all right? So now we're going to go into the technology risk. So on systems, on, let's say, for example, your HR system, right? If the HR system is protected just by a username and a password, right? So if the username is commonly aware of, is quite easily determined. Say, for example, the username is derived from the email address of every employee, right? So what's left is just the password, right? So 50% of the credential is easily guessed, right? So the attacker just need to figure out the other 50%. So to figure out the other 50%, they can obtain the password, say, from phishing attempts, social engineering, or they can guess common passwords that are typically used by people, right, in different services, say from Yahoo, Gmail, maybe Lazada, and so on and so forth. So once they manage to find a match, they manage to find a leaked password that works, or they manage to get a password that works, with the username and the password, they gain access to your system. And from your system, whether it is a HR system, it is an email system, it is Microsoft 365, or any other cloud-based or intranet systems, the system will assume that whomever has the access information, whomever is able to authenticate, is the actual end user. All right. So that's a very, very primitive, very traditional authentication mechanism. All right. So from a system perspective, if the username and the password, the credential is lost or is stolen, the system is assumed to be breached. All right. So we have the systemic risk in that sense. All right. Then this is the risk that we see from the organization perspective. But what if we look at the risk from the user perspective at their home? All right. So inside the confine of their home, we do know that employees don't have a single template for every home setup. All right. So it means that Bob and Alice, for example, or even James, all right, even though we all work from home, all right, our homes are not going to be the same. We're not going to have the same set of routers. We're not going to have the same set of network topology. Even, in fact, the placement of our laptops is not going to be the same. So what it means is that every employee poses a risk to the organization, right? Regardless of whether or not there is a so-called central policy being prescribed, right? So, for example, give you an example. Today we are all using Zoom, all right? But if all of us are to show our Zoom background during a meeting, all right, during an online meeting, for example, all right, what could be seen in the background could potentially give away hints or information to the attacker, or to potentially a Zoom hijacker, all right, to use it in another attack. All right. So for example, they may know your home layout. They may know that, oh, there is particular, you know, whiteboard behind your desk, right? That basically has some sensitive information, right? So that's from a physical aspect in the home, right? Where your webcam, your Zoom, your laptop layout could potentially so-called sabotage you, all right? Sabotage your employees. Then let's go a little bit laterally to a very common device in every home in order to gain access to the internet or to the office, and that is the home router, all right? So I'll presume that every organization today do not, you know, provide a router to every employee, all right? That's one assumption I want to start with, all right? So it means that every employee probably have one of their own default, rather AiSP provided Wi-Fi router, for example. So how sure is the organization is in terms of whether the router has been configured securely, right? So to give you an illustration, what could go wrong, all right, in a misconfigured router, say for example, a router that does not have its password changed from the default, all right, since day one of it being set up. If someone managed to gain access to the router, he or she could actually change the settings to divert the traffic somewhere else, all right? Or if the Wi-Fi setting is not strong enough, say for example, it's not using one of the higher wireless encryption settings, or the password to the SSID or to the wireless connection is not strong enough, all right? A hacker could be outside the apartment, all right, using his wireless laptop, you know, and he or she will be able to gain access to your wireless network, all right? So when someone is able to gain access to the same network as your employee, right, who is able to work from home and gain access to your, say, your VPN, your company portals and what's not, right? The attacker also have the same so-called networking ability, or rather the same connectivity, right? So he or she could potentially sniff upon the traffic or the conversation and so-called steal sensitive information and access information as well, right? So I briefly touched upon the router, all right? So the router is just like any other device, right? So at a typical home, you still have other smart devices, all right? Like for example, a smart TV, a smart vacuum cleaner, or just a smart webcam, right? So all these IoT devices or all these internet connected devices, they themselves, are they configured securely enough? Because if, like I mentioned, if a hacker has access to any one of these, the hacker could potentially use any of these poorly configured devices as a conduit, as a proxy, to so-called find out about the laptop or to try to gain access to your company services, all right? Then from a policy perspective, right, in a fortress mentality, right, typically when we see that in a traditional organization, right, the IT staff, or rather you could have procedures to say that machines are being monitored, all right, systems are being monitored, network is being monitored, and you will have drills, you have so-called physical audits, and you have checks. But what happens now when everyone is working from remote, right? Are your IT staff also equipped to, extend their reach of monitoring and so-called response beyond the perimeter into their home, all right? So here we have a few different considerations to think of. Firstly, I do believe that every organization has the right, to delve into the employees issue or organization issue laptops, for example, all right, to be able to do monitoring and surveillance for, company compliance and or security purpose. But organizations also given the right to go into the home network to check whether or not the network is secure or strong enough for their to be fit for use for their purpose. So I think that's one gray area here, all right? So long story short, all right, from a sampling of all these risks, right, we can come up with a few strategies or tactics, all right, to further improve upon these so-called weaknesses that we have briefly identified or inventory, all right? So let's take a look at malware coming from external, all right, external threats. So the best practice is that every system should have basic cyber hygiene, all right? Or the organization should practice cyber hygiene, right? So standard SOP, all right? Software should be securely set, all right? Laptops issued to employees should be, configured with a certain baseline, all right? So there is no so-called misconfiguration, very lax settings, and so forth. Antivirus is there. The laptop has full encryption, and so forth, all right? And every employee who log into the laptop should be using a least privilege. So in the event that, so for example, James will log into his laptop as James, but not the system administrator, right? So if I want to install a software, I need to ask IT, and IT has to be able to securely remote access in and do the necessary configuration, right? So that in the event of ransomware, the malware can only happen as James, but not as the super administrator. Because once the ransomware or malware runs as system administrator, the malware can have full privilege into the whole entire laptop, for example, right? Then devices like routers, Wi-Fi, and so forth, if possible, guide your employees to set up strong, secure enough settings for all their devices, especially those that use directly with the laptops or the so-called work from home devices, right? Or if possible, organization can issue your employees a router just for the purpose, all right? And then of course, from an email perspective, because there's a lot of phishing attacks going on, right? Email servers, or rather email providers these days, they could help you to set up with anti-phishing, anti-spoofing settings. So take a look at that. And how about user credentials? So just now I talked about username and password being the weak point, all right? So to guard against that, already a lot of services out there are using multi-factor authentication, all right? MFA or 2FA, all right? Depending on how you look at it. So besides using a username and password, you must use another device, another software to key in a particular number or particular message, or to press an OK button and say that you are the one logging in, all right? And from an organization perspective, from policy level, you probably have to look at policies that could consider the psychology of your employees, because now they're working from home. Could they be under duress? So there's a very good article written by, I think, ESET and Cybersecurity, which is a Mayer Briggs organization. They do psychology, all right? So they do have some guidelines that advise companies to consider the psychology of their employees, because when they work from home, they have a different stress level, and stress, or rather human behaviors, can be detected by environmental factors, all right, or emotions. So if you can take in consideration of that, work with your HR, then your controls will be a little bit more so-called a bit more holistic with the human perspective involved. All right, so that's what I mean by the human firewall, the human EDR. And of course, when you want to do drills, you probably have to start to consider, how about your DR drills, your cybersecurity, so-called incident drills. You may have to involve people who are working from home in the exercises to see what kind of outputs you have, what kind of outcomes, and then you probably have to tweak or refine your policy. All right. Okay, so I think I'm running short of time, so I better quickly go to the useful resources. So these are some of the links that I have shared with you. So you can take a look at them, all right? So of course, I do believe that in Singapore, we do have our SingCert, we have our Go Safe Online, our digital, Go Digital and Go Secure. So you can take a look at them from a business perspective, all right? Then, of course, AiSP also have some of the other very good articles and resources for you to tap on our website. Right. So with this, I want to conclude this sharing. And if you have any question, we can go into the Q&A later on.
Thank you, Mr. Tan, for the informative sharing. We will now invite Mr. Beng Hai Sim, Head of Technical Sales of ESET Asia Pacific, to cover more on social engineering. Mr. Beng, please.
Give me a second. Let me. Okay. Okay. There's a view that's blocking my slide. So let me switch to. Okay. I hope you all can hear me. And thank you for having me here today. My topic for this session is social engineering. In terms of security awareness training, social engineering is a good place to start because it is easy for people to understand and identify with. It is also easier to explain than technical threats, and it helps to link people's personal life with the overall security message that your security team is trying to communicate. My name is Beng Hai Sim, and everybody calls me Sim. I'm the head of technical sales, APEC, at ESET Asia Private Limited. And my responsibility includes planning and executing technical education strategies and programs for the region. My team is also responsible for organizing internal trainings for our sales and marketing teams and educate them on the current cybersecurity trends. I also take part in public relations and external communication activities, such as Business Forward with Canon on Money FM 89.3 in May 2018. So in the live broadcast, I talk about the importance of digital security from device to information to network. So if you are interested to listen to the recording, it is available at the bottom of this slide. Okay, so first of all, let us understand what is the term social engineering means. So as you can see here, there are many social media apps available on Apple App Store as well as Google Play Store. And each of these mobile apps serve a different purpose. Let's see in the next slide. Here's an illustration. For example, if I post about donut on Facebook, I'm telling my friends I like donuts. If I post it on Instagram, I'm showing my friend, here's a photo of my donut. And when I tweet on Twitter, I'm actually telling my friends that I'm eating a donut. Then on LinkedIn, I'm showing my skills include donut eating and so on. Many users are oblivious to the risks to which they are or they may expose themselves by sharing personal information on social platforms. The same goes for applying little to no restriction on who can see their activities on networking sites. In addition, social media users tend to use more than one channel. As a result, attackers can build a fairly rich profile of their target by piecing together information they gathered from the target's profile and activities on various networking sites. So here's the definition of social engineering. Social engineering is a form of psychological manipulation, and cyber criminals use it to trick people into handing over personal and sensitive information, usually through deceptive and fraudulent means. And phishing is one in which criminals try to access confidential information, whereby they try to pass off malicious email, websites, and messages as being credible and trustworthy. Social networking sites have opened up new ways of sharing all kinds of private information, so much so that the disclosure of a variety of personal details on the internet has become the second nature to many users. However, the more information you pour into the online world, the more at risk you are to spilling information that may put you in attackers' sight. For more information on how oversharing on social media can trip you up, you can refer to the link at the bottom of this slide. Now I have mentioned the word phishing in my previous slide. So what exactly is phishing? This is Jeff Kosey, founder and managing director of Chilisoft Limited. Chilisoft is our exclusive distributor in New Zealand. The hint in this photo is if you use a fishing rod, then you will only catch one fish at a time. If you want to catch lots of fishes, you might want to try casting a net into the ocean. And here's the definition of phishing. It's a play on the word phishing, deceptive email, text, or other messages sent to a target in order to steal their account credentials. Frequently used to obtain access to financial services in order to steal money, but also used to obtain a network credential of an employee, social media account, and even online gaming account. Let's take a look at the types of phishing techniques. There are many ways to catch a fish. So using a net to catch whatever there is. You can also use a spear and aim directly at a specific fish. Or if you are brave enough to try whaling, that is the opportunity to catch the big fish. So here's a link from our We Live Security blog on the topic, what is spear phishing and why is it so dangerous? If you are interested, okay, the link to this blog post is at the bottom of this slide. So let's take a look at the definition of spear phishing. It is a tactic used by cyber criminals whereby they attempt to attack a specific individual as a conduit into the organization. The purpose of the attack is the same as with any phishing email, to gain access to login or confidential information, or to deliver malware. So in this instance, the attack is targeted. So recent high-profile data breaches such as JP Morgan, Siemens, and Target, okay, they are all attributed to spear phishing attack. In some cases, the targets has been smaller, playing on the fact that smaller companies may not have the same security infrastructure or employee awareness level to combat an attack. So whatever size your organization is, be aware that you may be a target. As an employee, it is important to be vigilant when receiving emails that require you to take specific action. Looking for unusual language and vocabulary or misspelled words will help prevent the organization from becoming the next victim of a cyber attack. If you are in doubt about the authenticity of an email or a request, contact your IT security team and ask for their assistance in order to be better prepared and educated on how to spot a spear phishing attack. Twitter still recovering from the recent brazen breach, where attackers hijacked 130 accounts belonging to prominent figures and used to handle the handles to peddle a Bitcoin scam. They have shed some light on the circumstances that led to this incident. And according to the company's investigation, the attacker used social engineering to target a handful of its employees via a phone spear phishing attack. For more information, please refer to the link at the bottom of this slide. Next up, let's take a look at clone phishing. So it is a type of phishing attack whereby a legitimate and previously delivered email containing an attachment or link has its content and recipient addresses taken and used to create an almost identical or cloned email. The attachment or link within the email is then replaced with a malicious version and then sent from an email address spoofed from the previous sender and appears to come from the original sender. So it may claim to be a resend of the original of an updated version of the original. So this technique could be used to pivot indirectly from a previously infected machine and gain a foothold on another machine by exploiting the social trust associated with the inferred connection due to both parties receiving the original email. Here's an example of a clone phishing email. Both emails are identical, but the link on the right has been replaced with a link to a phishing site. You won't know until you click on the link or button. Here's another example of a clone phishing website. The prompt on the left has a movable window. However, the prompt on the right is not movable. This is because it is a web page, not an application. For some, you might not notice this, but the actual Chrome extension does not have a .pw appended to the link. Next up, whaling. So to hunt a whale, you will need a harpoon as seen in this photo. In the cyber world, the big fish is not the fish in his hand, but him, the sea level. So the term whaling has been coined for spear phishing attack directed specifically at senior executives or high-profile targets. In this case, the content will be crafted to target an upper management or the person's role in the company. The content of a whaling attack email may be an executive issue, such as a summons or customer complaint. Here's an example of a whaling attack email. So if you are the owner of the company, you would most likely to click on the download notice, all right, or a case info in this case. Notice the download is separated, is 2 words, not one. Okay, so if you are just an employee, you wouldn't click on the link, right? And here's another example of a whaling attack. In this case, it is a complaint email. And would you click on the link without finding out the authenticity of the email? So not all phishing attacks require a fake website. Messages that claim to be from a bank told user to dial a number regarding problems with their bank accounts. And once a phone number, so usually is owned by the phisher and provided by a voice over IP service was dialed, the users are prompted to enter their account numbers and PIN. Phishing or voice phishing sometimes use fake caller ID data to give the appearance that the call comes from a trusted organization. Okay, I have a short video clip on voice phishing, newbie level. Hope you enjoy. Let me try if the audio is okay. Sorry.
당황하셨어요? 당황하지 마시고 남자처럼 생긴 여동생분이 사고를 당하셔가지고 수술비를 빨리 주셔야 됩니다.
어디 병원인데요?
여기가 인천병원인데요.
제 동생 전주에 있는데.
저 전주에 있는 인천병원인데요.
아 그래요? 전주 어딘데요? 뭐 아중리요? 북대 앞? 객사? 아니 평화동? 아니면 만성동이요? 만성동?
많이 당황하셨어요? 당황하지 마시고 원래 사람이 그 당황을 하게 되면은 말이 빨라지고 급해지고 그러는 분이거든요. 선생님 약간 지금 당황을 하신 것 같아요.
아니요, 당황 안 했어요.
아, 당황을 아직 안 하셨구나.
아니 저기요, 제 동생이 다쳤다고요? 어딜 다쳤다는 거예요?
어딜 다쳐야 돈이 제일 많이 나와요?
뭐라고요? 이거 보이스피싱 아니야?
선생님, 제가 보여요?
And here's another video clip on voice phishing. This time is the pro level. Enjoy.
Do you want to do a sample phishing call?
What's phishing?
Phishing is voice elicitation, and basically what you do is you use the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it. Who are you gonna call?
Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider
Okay.
and see if I can get them to give me your email address.
I bet they're good. I bet they have my back. But yeah, go for it.
I'm gonna spoof from your number, so it's gonna look like it's calling from you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. My husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby, and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry, I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for usage information, and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying, and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
gmail.com?
Jessica gets my personal email address.
Now, if I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, how would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Shh, shh, shh. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account. Okay, my
Jessica uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
5127.
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry, so there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my
Thank you
password.
so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked me out of my own account.
I'll get her fed after this. All right, thank you.
Holy shit. So they just gave you access to my entire cell phone account.
You're gonna have to go on and change your password now because it's Jess, my name.
And all it took was a crying baby and a phone call.
Yes.
I really thought that my cell phone company would protect me.
Okay, the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI in short, and Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, have issued a joint advisory to warn about a search invoice phishing or phishing attacks that is targeting at staff at a number of companies. So the spike in phone-based phishing attack is partially attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has forced companies to shift to telework and led to a boom in the use of virtual private networks, or VPN in short, and the elimination of in-person verification. For more information, please refer to the link at the bottom of this slide. SMS phishing, also known as smishing, uses cell phone text messages to induce people to disclose their personal information. The message would include a shortened URL to hide the actual link to the phishing site. So let's take a look at some SMS phishing examples. So this is the first message that is quite common. If you are an Android user, you simply ignore this message. But if you are an Apple user, you might just click on the link. The second message is common across both Android and iOS platforms. You need to pay close attention to the sender and the link in the message. And the last message is closer to us. It appears to be from OCBC Bank, but the sender and link is suspicious. If in doubt, contact your bank directly to verify if the message is authentic. Now that we have a better understanding of the various phishing techniques, let's take a look at how you can protect yourself from phishing attacks. Okay. So here are 5 simple ways you can protect yourself from phishing attack. Never click on links, download files, or open attachments in emails or on social media, even if it appears to be from a known trusted source. Malicious macro in phishing emails have become an increasingly common way of delivering ransomware in the past years. These documents too often get past antivirus programs with no problems. The phishing email contains a sense of urgency for the recipient, and as you can see in the screenshot, the document steps the user through the process. If the user fails to enable the macro, the attack is unsuccessful. Never click on links in an email to a website unless you are absolutely sure that it is authentic. If you have any doubt, you should open a new browser window and type the URL into the address bar. Be wary of emails asking for confidential information, especially if it asks for personal details or banking information. Legitimate organizations, including and especially your bank, will never request for sensitive information via email. And pay close attention to the shortened link, especially on social media. Cybercriminals often use these from bit.ly, tinyURL, and other shortening services to trick you into thinking that you are clicking on a legitimate link, when in fact you are being deliberately directed to a fake site. In this example, you can see the fake site generated to a shortened link. Here you can see tinyURL allows you to generate a custom URL. Cybercriminal may use these fake sites to steal your entered personal details or to carry out a drive-by download attack, thus infecting your device with malware. Okay, plenty of phishing emails are fairly obvious. They will be punctuated with plenty of typos, words in capitals, and punctuation. They may also have an impersonal greeting. Think of those dear customer or dear sir or madam salutations, or feature implausible and generally surprising content. Cybercriminals often make mistakes in this email, sometimes even intentionally, to get past spam filters, improve responses without a smart recipient who will not fall for the con. Sometimes a reputable company does not need you to do something urgently. For example, in 2014, eBay asked its customer to change their password quickly after its data breach. However, this is an exception to the rule. Usually, threats and urgency, especially if it's coming from what claims to be a legitimate company, are a sign of phishing. Always, where possible, use a secure website indicated by HTTPS, okay, and a security lock icon in the browser's address bar to browse, and especially when submitting sensitive information online, such as your credit card details. To make things worse, a website with HTTPS does not mean that the web page is safe. Most browsers will inform the user when they are on a non-secure page. Make sure the website is reputable by checking on the site certificate, not just the HTTPS indicator. To check the certificate of the site, look out for the issue to and issue by. And never use public Wi-Fi, unsecured Wi-Fi for banking, shopping, or entering personal information online. Means you choose convenience over safety. When in doubt, use your mobile 3G or 4G or LTE connection. Here's a short video clip, but I think we are running short of time, so we'll skip it. Okay, the link is there. We will share the slide with you after this session. Notice there are so many SSID with confusing names. For example, in this case, Rocket Jump 5G. So this indicates that there are fake access points to capture the user's data over the Wi-Fi. So I skip this video. And one last important message for all of you here. Always use a reputable endpoint security solution that can protect you from malware, phishing, spam, and other kinds of cyber threats. And how can ESET protect you from phishing attacks? So most phishing emails are from spams. A good anti-spam engine is important to filter out all these phishing emails. our anti-spam module is available on all these products, and anti-phishing module is available on most of our endpoint protection platform. With our anti-phishing module, user will be warned when accessing a potential phishing site. Okay, with that, if you have any question, please type on the Q&A panel. Okay, and we will leave it to the session later.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Sim, for the interesting sharing. We have now come to the Q&A session. If you do have any questions for the speakers, do type them into the Q&A panel. Now, it is my pleasure to hand the session to Mr. Tony Low, CAAP co-chair, who will be moderating the session. Mr. Low, please.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank all the speakers and the presenters for the session today. I hope the attendees of the webinar has found it very fruitful. Definitely, there's some questions that's coming up from all this very insightful presentations, right? Maybe I will kick off with a question to the panel themselves. I think just to warm up, right? For maybe the first questions I'll look at is looking at the trends in cybersecurity, cyber attacks, and prolonged COVID situations. What would you foresee the common cyber threats and the vulnerabilities faced by SMEs to address quickly? Maybe I will start off with Johnny. What do we say again? Okay, so I think cut short. What would be the what do you foresee common cyber threats and vulnerabilities faced by our SMEs in 2021? Since we are going into this extended work from home and COVID situation, and what kind of cyber attacks do you see that's coming along as well in your line of work, Johnny?
Yeah, so I mean, to put it, I think as what we shared today, right? I think the primary target are still the people, so the workers. So a lot of communication, because it's non-physical, means that it goes through emails, and the volume of emails will always be that part where in order for you to get work done, you tend to move faster. So I would say, I think as what is highlighted throughout, I think the phishing will still be the key portion. Business email compromise will be that. So a lot of things will be, I think, through the email vector itself, especially. And that actually drives to I think the whole point of a mindset change. So security awareness itself should be actually that key part on the focus on the individuals. So individuals itself, I think from a few things, from the mindset that, you know, like even mentioned by James, you know, the risk mindset needs to be there, because in the end you need to always have a mindset to for anything that comes in, do a verification before you even confirm. Okay, I think these are just additional. And even as a tools perspective, I think the whole awareness needs to be part of a knowledge management. That means policies, processes need to be easily available to individuals on what to do when something happens as well. Yeah.
So Johnny, just a follow-up question. You mentioned about the mindset strengthening. Are you referring to training and creating that such of awareness through awareness program that can be run in the organization?
Yeah.
From your mindset.
So I can say that yeah, the awareness program actually needs to be, and that does not only mean, you know, downloading training, but also sometimes is sharing and the ability to make it easy to even talk about reporting potential suspicious files, emails. These are even key things that needs to be part of the awareness.
Okay, understand. I think the sharing part is important as we all work from home remotely as well. Maybe I'll pose the same question back to Sim. What would you think will be the cyber attack trends faced by SMEs today? Is there any difference between SMEs and the enterprise facing in your line of work? for 2021?
In fact, like as I mentioned, people is the weakest link in terms of the security posture, right? So SME or SMB, right? They will be the conduit to more bigger targets, right? In this case, maybe the enterprises, and they do not have the same security infrastructure as what enterprise has. So I think cybersecurity awareness training is important as well to all the users.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sim. Thank you, Sim. James, what will be your outlook like for 2021 for SMEs? What they should be cautioned about? Yeah, on mute, James.
All right, quick one as usual, my style. I think BEC, as what mentioned by Johnny, is quite prevalent actually. Means it's like common as the flu. All right, BEC is business email compromise. All right. So what happened is that nowadays we hear a lot of breaches. Breaches means a lot of hacks, incidences affecting websites, e-commerce, company, and whatnot. And the most common theme is that their database is being breached, and those database contains information about individuals, like their address, the properties of the person, like the name, and worse, sometimes it could even contain so-called weakly secured passwords, all right, or weakly protected passwords, all right. So all these passwords could potentially allow an attacker to reuse them against the SME businesses services, right? Because employees, or rather humans, we tend to use the same password. If we have too many passwords to remember, we tend to use the same one across different services. Right, so that's a very common theme. So hopefully, as businesses or any individuals today start to adopt MFA, 2FA like a religion. All right, I mean, we really, if we can, we feedback to services, we feedback to our IT team and tell them, hey, our service is not using 2FA when we log in. It's just take in our username and password and just it. I think we should become an advocate and tell them we need 2FA. All right, we need something else, not just our username and password. All right. Then next thing I think that businesses need to do a clean up is to check, especially their email servers, all right, if there's any forwarding rules being added, all right, because I think I've seen some cases with different companies, all right. So what happens is that this kind of business rules, or rather company to do inventory, you need to go find out how many systems they have, are they patched, are they secure enough, do they have hidden rules, do they have hidden forwarding rules, do they have hidden backdoors, hidden features that they don't know of, or hidden device, or even new devices in their organization. All right, try to find that as much as possible. All right, so you need to identify. Then, of course, from the home perspective, we want to come back to the home user perspective. All right, start to not just do security awareness to everyone. I think people need to be trained, yes, but after that, of course, extend cyber drills or incident testings. All right, you want to test those drills, test some scenarios when your employees are at home, when they're outside using, say, public resources, say Wi-Fi and whatnot. You want to test in simple scenarios. All right, how can they execute company policies, or how can they execute cyber hygiene while they are not inside your company? And then, of course, you need to refine the policy and to either get the necessary software, increase the necessary training, or even add additional procedures, or to, I don't know, you may even need to get your HR involved, all right, to find a compromise or find a sweet spot to that. Yeah.
Okay. So just a follow-on question for James, right? You mentioned about MFA or 2FA. Is for SME, we all know that the challenges in terms of technology adoption. So is there any, like, if I have one option for MFA or 2FA, what would you suggest that is lightweight and easy to deploy? Just one.
Oh, I can't be too product specific, then it becomes advertisement. All right.
No, not product. I think in the technique. Oh.
Okay, but I think I've seen some good use cases of MFA. I mean, in the past, you need to carry a hard token, and then you need to press some button to get some numbers, right? Today, I think some MFA device solution that become so intuitive, whereby it's just a software installed on your mobile phone. Could be an iPhone, could be an Android, right? And the security is actually so-called controlled by your device. So as long as your phone is not jailbroken, it's not rooted, all right, and you take care of it, make sure that you put strong password on it, don't just depend on biometric, right? Your phone and the app can actually prompt you. So for example, now I'm trying to log into my company email, all right? I can actually say log in via app. So I just need to click a link on the web page itself. It will not just ask me for username and password. Instead, there will be a prompt to my mobile phone that I hold on to and ask me, can I approve this login? So I just click on yes, then the website allows me to go in. So if you look at it, doesn't it resemble our SingPass? All right, our SingPass has you either click on it or you scan a QR code, and then all you need to do is go to your app, authenticate using your biometrics feature or your password, and then you can just log on to the website. All right. So we want to use this in the assumption that password and username are no longer enough. All right. But of course, if we still want to stick to username and password, then we have to make sure that we have a very long password and a username. I hope that the username is not easily, determined, and to solve the strategy of remembering password, then I think we need to encourage organizations or even individuals to adopt password management. Right, either using software like Password Manager, all right, that is hooked to your company, or you can prescribe a well-known password manager that is good enough, right? Then you advocate people to store password in there instead of reusing bad password or to write it down somewhere.
Okay, thank you, James. I think that was insightful. I think the relation to SingPass is actually to everyone. Everybody understood when you mentioned SingPass, right? When we log in, we need to scan a QR code. We need to have a mobile phone. I think that's a very good tie back to MFA, because I think that term might not relate to a lot of people, especially when we talk about multi-factor. It's kind of a big word, right? Okay, thanks, James. Maybe I bounce it back to Sim. I think one question in your topic, you talk about social engineering, you talk about phishing, and we see that it's an increasing problem today because we all work in isolation in home, right? So we see that increase in US and Europe. We're also starting to see more reports in Singapore as well in recent years. I think what would be the quick tips and tricks that you would recommend for our companies to implement for their staff? That's number one. And number two, you could look at, I think you also did mention specifically of phishing. How does it change phishing, or how does it extend phishing as a primary target way of social engineering? Sim?
Okay, so first of all, to answer your questions on, what's the first question? Sorry.
Tips and tricks. First, start off first.
Tips and tricks. Okay.
Yeah.
So as I think the government agency has been doing a good job, educating, those citizens. Like for example, if you receive a call with a plus sign, in front of the phone number that appears on your caller ID, all right? So it's a phishing call, right? Or scam. So I do personally receive all this kind of call. So advice is not to answer those, and you can block those calls so that in case they call you again and you are actually busy, all right, working on something, and you answer the call, and unknowingly you provided some information to the scammer, right? For me, I would actually, I would try to answer the call, and I would try to waste the time of scammer, So I do get a few calls, and after the call, I tell them, I'm aware of what you're trying to do, so don't waste your time, okay, and so on. Okay, so tips and tricks is, for example, you heard of some security breaches, right? Say for example, recently Lazada, right? There was some information leaked. So if you are a user, especially today is 11/11, a lot of people go online buy. Say so to protect yourself, change your password, all right, and always be aware of any unauthorized transaction that was made with your credit card. And if possible, try not to add your credit card details into all these kind of apps, right? Usually when I do shopping online, I will only provide the credit card information when checking out, okay? And of course, ESET, we do have password managers to help users to remember their logins for different websites. It also includes, password generator, which is a really strong password generator, and it was stored for you. Okay, it is available on our Smart Security Premium. Okay, this is a consumer product. For business product wise, we do have banking and payment protection. Okay, that is built into our endpoint protection platform. So both consumer and business has this banking and payment protection. So whenever the user try to make some transaction or log into the bank, right? So this secure browser will be launched, and it will protect any keyloggers that is already on the system from collecting all these credentials, right, or the URL that the user visits. Okay, so this secure browser will actually it will encrypt the keystrokes that the user entered on the browser. Okay, and of course, always be aware of the breaches out there. So once, let's say, a company was breached, this open opportunities to the hackers, right, to pretend that they are from Lazada support and trying to get some information from you. Okay, so be aware of all this. Always make sure to check the sender email address to make sure that they are from the original organization that they claim that they are sending from. Okay. I think, yeah, basically that is some of the tips that I have.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think the mindset shift that I want to relate back to Johnny and the training that you mentioned clearly, right? The emails that's coming in. I think we all see the folks who are carrying out all this attack are putting a lot of effort in terms of creating real pixel perfect images, fonts, right? So apart from looking at the format of the email, maybe I'll post it back to Sim again. Is there anything that we need to look at on a phishing email content?
Yes.
Or any other things that
usually, the phishing email, they will have definitely some grammar mistake, spelling, right? So these are intentionally to bypass your existing anti-spam or anti-phishing modules. Okay, so always check the sender's address. Okay, and for example, if there's a link or a button in the email, always hover your mouse over it to check the URL, where is it directing you to, all right? And if it's not as what is mentioned, for example, a link to the login page of the bank, okay, instead is directing you to a particular IP address. So just be aware of all this, because usually the first page you try to log in, that is the phishing site, right? And after you enter your username, password, okay, then it will redirect the user back to the original page. And that is, the user will think, oh, maybe I entered the wrong password in the first try, and then he will do a second. So be aware of all these phishing sites. Okay, so a good endpoint protection would warn the user if they are trying, if the link direct them to a phishing site.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Sim. I think the one thing to note is really the email and the URL that we're looking at, right? I think we're almost coming to the end. I just have one more question posed to our panel as well. What is one advice for our participant today? If it's just one advice that you would like to give for our participant to be prepared ahead for 2021. I think 2021 is a big year. Maybe I'll start with Johnny. One advice from you.
I think of all the things we shared today, maybe it's like maybe to actually really get people to kickstart. I think the key part we need to fall back to is still make sure you still have your basic cyber hygiene. So like some of the resources we shared. So example, I think if we come from that angle today, even for any SMEs, the key focus you need to, I think, protect for your folks at home, especially because they're working from devices which could be your company devices or actually their own. But really, I would say to really get them to do key things like, I mean, keeping the patches up to date, ensuring the endpoint is actually also installed, endpoint protection is installed and up to date as well. And of course, there are key things for any of the services, example, SaaS services, I mean, Office 365. Just make sure, we talk about multi-factor, those are already by default turned on. Other platforms you use to do the collaboration, be the likes of Office 365 or even Zoom, all this, I mean, really take the steps to ensure that you take the same controls, like I mean, making sure that you can identify someone before you allowing them into the meeting and things like that. So this could be some of the key things to first, I think, protecting the employees, getting them to protect themselves for a start as well. Measures that they can really so push that down even as a advice and as a cyber hygiene thing. So.
Okay. What about Freddie? One advice. James, sorry, James. One advice from you, James.
Okay. I think I just want to submit and say that let's not procrastinate or be in a la mode, right? That things will not happen to us. And of course, since we're talking about controls, all right, instead of just thinking about what to buy next, all right, maybe you just need to do a stock take first. Try to identify, because now you heard stories about the different kind of threats like phishing, social engineering, hacking events, what's not, right? So you probably have an idea to think of what are the potential threats that can come to you. And then after that, of course, look internally, what do you have and what do you lack of to guard against all these threats, right? So if you think there's a gap, then of course, go and select, go and buy, go and ask around for help, right? But of course, don't delay it. Start this assessment as soon as you can, right? Then build a roadmap for it, yeah.
Sounds good, James. What about you, Sim? What's the one advice from you?
Okay, the one advice that I have for the participants today is, like we have people, process, and technology, right? You can have the best technology, or you have a proper process, but people is still the weakest link. Okay, so cybersecurity awareness training is important, as well as cyber hygiene. And in terms of personally wise, I don't share sensitive information on social media platforms. Okay, so I have Facebook, but I only use it to look at some information or browse some news, right? So I don't generally share a lot of information about what like, for example, where I am today, or I'm flying to somewhere. I share some air tickets information. So I don't do that. Okay, so be aware of you might be a target, all right, for attacker. So always practice those cyber hygiene.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sim. So let me just summarize 3 points here that I got. One, cyber hygiene. Be sure, keeping up the standards in terms of the policies that you have in your system, especially with the work from home. Don't procrastinate. I like James' idea. Just do it today. There's no tomorrow, right? Just make sure what you need to do. Just do a quick stock take. And last but not least, Sim mentioned about people. Right? People is always the weakest link, right? Don't be mindful of what you share online. I think this is important. We don't get too exposed. With that, thanks to my panels today. I think we have a good insight in terms of the presentations, and we have a kind of a good question answer. I think we got covered a bit about it, as well as some key advices for our participant. With that, I will close the Q&A. Pass it back to Priscilla. Hi, Priscilla.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, panelists, for the interactive Q&A session. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation today. We hope the Q&A session have helped to provide you with useful insights. Before we log off, we wish to invite our speakers to remain online and turn on their cameras while we take a virtual group photo. Whenever you are ready, panelists. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Okay, thank you everyone. Lastly, we would love to hear your feedback on the event. So please click on the survey link when you exit. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Stay
Thanks.
safe.